History of the Telephone by Louis Garcia and Grady Spitzer.
Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3rd, 1847. He died on August 2nd, 1922. Alexander was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. He was named after his grandfather. He has two brothers, Melville Bell Jr. and Edward Bell, who died to tuberculosis. His parents are Melville Bell Sr. and Grace Bell. He was homeschooled most of his life. He went to school 1 year at a private school and did 2 years in Edinburgh Royal High School. March 10th, 1971, Bell's most famous invention was created, the telephone.
Things that happened during the invention of the telephone. Around the time of the invention, the Great Chicago Fire devastated most of Chicago. Then, shortly after, the blue jeans were invented and were virtually indestructible. The jeans were aimed to help miners, farmers, cow drivers, and mechanics. Another thing that happened around the time of the telephone was the Great Sioux War of 1876 and 1877. During the war, a series of battles and negotiations, which occurred in 1876 and 1877, between the Mohawks, Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and the United States. The cause of the war was the desire of the U.S. government to obtain ownership of the Black Hills.
How a telephone helped. The invention of the telephone opened a wide world of communication, and many businesses benefited from what came after the telephone, since there were more options of communication with it. But when it was first invented, mainly wealthy people and large corporations owned it since it was so expensive. Since no one owned it, companies would have to make direct lines. Direct lines are wires that the companies would have to rub between locations themselves.
Timeline of the telephone. The first picture is a picture of the very first type of telephone to be made by Alexander Graham Bell. This was the first phone to make a transcontinental phone call. This was a big achievement considering the current time in which it was made. The next phone was made as the wall-mounted phone, which was bigger but made clearer phone calls. The next phone is still used today in companies to make phone calls to other companies or their employees. The next phone was a handheld phone that could be portable that you could take with you wherever you went. This was the next big step in telephones. Phones nowadays are touchscreen. You can play games on them, video call, and now phones have at least 2 to 3 cameras.
What we think. We think the invention is great. Almost the whole United States owns a phone. It came from something that only rich people own to something almost everyone owns. Plus, the telephone grew to something more than communication. Now you can play games or FaceTime now. I think the telephone is one of the most owned items because of how much it has evolved. There are so many different types of phones now as well. Thank you for listening to our presentation.